Torah says, that you have to honor your father and your mother. And this is one of the favorite mitzvahs of all parents. And it's the one mitzvah that applies just about to everybody, because you're usually on one end or the other, and sometimes both. Sometimes you're the parent, sometimes you're the kid. So there's a couple of points here. When it comes to honoring your parents, there are a couple of points you want to understand. First of all, here it says, honor your father and your mother. Later on in the Torah, you find it says, Ish imo v'aviv tiro. It says that each person, a man, should fear his mother and his father. Later on in Vayikra, it says, Ish imo v'aviv. Here it says, you have to honor your father and your mother. Later on, it says, each man has to fear his mother and his father. So the Meforshim say, why does the Torah switch it around in two different places? Why does the Torah go back and forth? So the Meforshim say like this. You see, when it comes to honor, who do you instinctively honor more? Your father, your mother? Okay, that's what we would think. And the Gemara says, Golui v'yadul, if they, we think, there's this dad guy, boy guy type of thing. So the Torah tells us, when it comes to honoring, in your heart of hearts, you honor your mother more. And the Gemara says, your mother soothes you a little bit more with words. Your mother's a little more soothing. So if a guy comes back, if you didn't do well on a test, your father's likely to say, well, you're a good nothing for nothing who's never going to amount to anything. And your mother will say, well, a 39 is also good for the amount you studied, which was 0. So, she'll always find the positive angle on it. So the mother kind of soothes things. So in your heart of heart, you honor your mother more. That's what the Gemara says. I think in our terms, we all know there's something. It's all American. Like there's apple pie, Chevrolet, and mom. It's just all American. So when it comes to honoring, the Torah puts it in terms of honor your father and your mother. One you're less likely to honor. Your mother you're going to honor for sure. So the emphasis goes on your father, because that's the one you're going to honor more. When it comes to fear, so who do you fear more? Right? It's very rare that you ever hear a father say to his kids, you just wait till your mother gets home. It doesn't usually happen. So there are places like that, but for most part it's not. So the Torah puts, when it comes to fear, the Torah puts the fear in front of the honor. Now the question becomes like this: what's the idea? What's the idea of the mitzvah of honoring your parents? Before we even get to the halachas of what constitutes honoring and fearing, what is the idea here? What's the idea of honoring? Why should you honor your parents? What's the most basic idea?
They brought you into the world.
And therefore?
You should thank them.
You should thank them. There's something in Hebrew. You know what gratitude is called in Hebrew? Hakaras hatov. You know what the words hakaras hatov mean? Hakaras hatov means recognizing the good. When you thank somebody, what are you doing when you're thanking somebody? In life in general, when you thank somebody, what are you doing? You're expressing that you recognize that you owe them a debt of gratitude. Everybody, what does a thank you matter? What does it matter if somebody knocks into you and says, excuse me? Guy bumps into you on the bus. A guy rushes past you. A guy rushes past you, he brushes you, doesn't say anything. And if the guy would have said, oh, excuse me, then you're okay. Why? What does it matter? What does it matter? It doesn't hurt. What's the difference? Why does excuse me make it all better? You know what the answer is? Because if he didn't say excuse me, that means you don't exist. You're insignificant. But he didn't say, oh, excuse me. Excuse me means you're important. That's what excuse me means. In not saying excuse me means you're insignificant. You don't even exist. So when I say excuse me, it means I recognize that I shouldn't have done that to you. It has nothing to do with the physical pain. Same thing when you say thank you. Thank you just simply means I recognize what you've done for me. What's so important that your parents always teach your kids? Say please, say thank you. Make sure you say thank you, thank you. Why? The answer is because it shows that I recognize that you've done something for me. That's what's crucial here. So when the Torah says that you have hakaras hatov. Hakaras hatov means you got to recognize the good. People say, people got all sorts of complaints about the parents. I might complain my parents didn't do this for me, didn't do that for me. Your parents have done for you. Your parents have brought you into the world. They've nurtured you. They've paid for you. Your parents have done everything for you. How can you go and say, and then people come along, they have tainas, they have complaints against their parents. Look what your parents have done for you. So ultimately, a person has to recognize the concept of hakaras hatov, of gratitude, is that if you recognize that you have gratitude, that your parents have that gratitude, then ultimately that will carry over and you realize what kind of gratitude you owe to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So, HaKadosh Baruch Hu brought you into the world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you the parents, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you the health. Whatever HaKadosh Baruch Hu did, ultimately, it's a fundamental idea is that we're supposed to feel gratitude. I knew a guy in England, a rat got into a house. a rat came into the house, and so they were chasing the rat around the house. The kids were chasing the rat around the house with a broom. They finally trapped the rat under a bed. They were going to kill him. So the grandfather comes walking into the room, and he says, "What's going on?" They said, "We got a rat trapped under the bed." He said, "Leave the rat alone." So he asked him, "Why?" So he says, "Well, I was in the Holocaust, and at night, when we were in the barracks in the Holocaust, it was freezing cold there. And we didn't have blankets, so we would lie against each other. The body warmth, we kept ourselves warm by lying against each other. I was the guy on the end of the row. So on one side of me, there was somebody else, and I was lying against him. On the other side of me was completely exposed. So at night, I would have been cold, except the rats were also cold, so they came and they rubbed up against me because they wanted to stay warm. So the rats kept me warm at night. So I have a debt of gratitude to the rats, therefore leave that rat alone." That was like, stop and think about it. First of all, they're rats. Rat doesn't know if you appreciate them or not. Second of all, we don't know that rat in England was related to those rats over in, it's not like, oh, that was my grandpa back in the barracks over there. We don't know that those rats were related to them. And so what the answer is because what you show appreciation is not just for the other person. Appreciation is for you. It's what you're doing for yourself. The Gemara says, a well that you drank out of, a pit of water, a water hole that you drank out of, you shouldn't throw a stone in it. Don't throw a stone into the water hole that you drank out of. Why not? It's an inanimate object. Why not? What's the answer? The answer is that it has an effect on us. If I don't show that gratitude, that's going to have an effect on me. I am developing a habit of taking things for granted, so eventually you're going to take people for granted. So Torah says, don't do that. That's why you find all over the place. You find all over the place that the Torah is a Torah of Kedusha. You're not allowed to shecht an animal. You're not allowed to kill an animal in a cruel way. You have to kill an animal when you kill it with shchita. So shchita is regarded as being the most painless form of execution, right, of animals. Okay, I understand. Why do we have to do that? Because you feel bad for the animals, right? We don't want to cause pain to the animals, so we shecht them with the sharpest knife possible. That by the time it makes the cut, the animal's dead before he can even feel it. Before the nerve sends the sensory nerves can feel pain, the animal's already dead. Okay, that's because we're being kind to the animals, right? Wrong. If you really wanted to be kind to the animals, don't kill them. 9 out of 10 cows surveyed recommend staying alive and grazing to painless death. Right? So what do you really want to be kind to the animals? So don't what do you call? What do you kill them for? The answer is it's not because of the animal. The animals are put there for human beings to use. So what does it do to you? What does it do to you if you kill an animal? What's it going to do to you? If you take a hammer and you bludgeon an animal, what effect is that going to have on you, as opposed to going, with a shchita knife? The same thing when it comes, Moshe Rabbeinu in a story in Egypt, it says that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't strike the earth for the plague of, he didn't strike the water and he didn't strike the earth. Why not? Because the water helped him when he was thrown into the Nile. The water protected him. And the earth protected him when he buried the Egyptian in the earth. He killed the Egyptian, he hit him in the earth, he hit him in the sand. So Moshe Rabbeinu didn't, out of gratitude to the earth and out of gratitude to the water, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't what do you call it? I understand. The earth doesn't care, the water doesn't care, and even more than that, Moshe Rabbeinu was willing to pass up on an opportunity to be involved in a massive Kiddush Hashem. You understand? There's going to be a sanctification of God's name here, because Moshe Rabbeinu, if you strike the earth and you strike the water, you're bringing about the plagues. The plagues are all to show that God's involved in the world. And look what Moshe Rabbeinu, for having gratitude, is that ridiculous? For having gratitude to the water, just out of gratitude to the water, that's why you're willing to bypass a share in the Kiddush Hashem of bringing about blood and showing that God's running the world? You understand what's going on here? The answer is because if you do it, you're going to turn yourself into a person who is not showing hakaras tov, you're not showing gratitude. And therefore, the first thing a person has to do is you have to honor your parents. You owe them a debt of gratitude. Sure, we all have problems with our parents. I'm sure my kids have problems with me. My parents didn't do this, my parents didn't do this. Everybody's got their issues with their parents. So, we'll talk about the halachic end of it. The first question I was asked here was a guy who didn't like his Hebrew name. It's Baal Tshuva. He adopted a Hebrew name and he didn't like the Hebrew name. There was a name that his parents gave at the bris. That was the first question that I was given, that I was asked. I had no idea. I had to go speak to the halachic authority. I think the second question I was asked, usually you're wondering, maybe guys ask me, what's the right bracha? That I'm good at. What if I forgot Yalla v'yava? Make my day. This guy comes over to me and says, he hates his father, has not been in contact with his father for 3 years. His father does not know he's in yeshiva. Has nothing to do with him. His father had been physically abusive. He really beat the kids up, beat the wife up. Really, the father was a lunatic. He wants to know if when his father dies, if he could not say Kaddish. How's that that's a good one for after breakfast. Right when my father, by the way, Rabbi, when my father dies, could I not say Kaddish? So I didn't know what to do. I obviously was not, because I went to a halachic authority, and the authority said that he does not have to. If his father is really, if he really hates his father that much, he does not have to say Kaddish. However, he is not allowed to do anything to expedite the death process. In other words, he can't kill his father, but the halacha is that you could have nothing to do with him. If your father has tormented you, you could have nothing to do with it, but you're not allowed to go, you're not allowed to do anything physically, actively against your parents. The end of the story was he took a hatchet and he turned his father's Lexus into a convertible, which involved the police, and it involved, which was not what he was told to do. See, there's a broad range over here. On the other hand, for most people, sure, your parents annoy you to a certain extent, and they got their habit. On the other hand, the Torah says you got a debt of gratitude. It's called the hardest mitzvah. It's called the hardest mitzvah in the Torah. That's idea number one. Idea number one is the debt of gratitude. Idea number two is that it goes back to something more fundamental. One of the differences between Torah society and the society around us, there's a fundamental difference. You ever hear the expression, society is advancing forward, right? The world is developing and advancing forward. By the way, they never defined where they're advancing to, right? They only said, we're advancing. Now, why you're advancing, it doesn't look to me like you're advancing. It looks like you're taking a few steps back. You have a world of crime and immorality and vulgarity and rap. So I don't think that that's a step forward. Even according to to the contrary, according to your approach that you originated in the jungle, it certainly sounds like you've taken a few steps back towards the jungle. So, and it's certainly jungle behavior. All right, people are running around with less clothing, not more clothing. They resemble more jungle people, more jungle animals than human beings, and so on and so forth. So what are you advancing to? But they claim we're advancing. Okay, because you have technology and you can shoot people better and around the corner with a machine gun that goes around, curls around the corner, and so you've advanced. Okay, if that's what you call advancing. Seder. Now, Torah society feels that the single most important event in history was what? The giving of the Torah at Sinai. That's the single most significant event in history. The Torah was being given at Sinai. The closer you are to Sinai, the higher your spiritual level. The farther you are from Sinai, the lower your spiritual. That's why we believe in something called, have you ever heard the expression Yeridas Hadoros? Yeridas Hadoros means that the generations are progressively at a lower level. We are nowhere near the level of the Chafetz Chaim's generation. The Chafetz Chaim's generation is nowhere near the level of the Vilna Gaon's generation. The Vilna Gaon is nowhere near the level of Rashi's generation. And Rashi's generation is not near the level of the Amoraim in the Gemara. The Amoraim are not, even the Amoraim in the Tanaim in the Gemara, right? You have the sages of the Mishnah, the sages of the Gemara. They can't argue. The sages of the Gemara can't argue with the sages of the Mishnah. They're a completely different level because they've dropped that much further because they've distanced themselves from the power source, which is the giving of the Torah at Sinai. Okay. So when a couple gets married, what do you give? What's the halacha? In order to marry your wife, what do you have to give her? A shava pruta, right? That means you can get married. If you got a pair of glasses, right under the chuppah, you can say, Harayat Mekudeshesli, right? You can pull out a pen, Harayat Mekudeshesli. It's also creative, and it's cheap, right? Don't do it, Dave. Right? Don't do it. Do it the old way. Give her a ring. Just do what you're told to do. Don't demonstrate your Gemara knowledge under the chuppah, right? Why? Because you have to give her. That's what's expected, and her bubby will kill you if you don't. Okay. Now, why do you give a ring? When you get married, where does the idea of a ring come from? Ever think about that? Why do you give a ring?
Full circle.
One of the ideas is a full circle. Now you're complete. It also shows that what do you call it, that by putting it on her finger is something that she wears on her finger, so it doesn't look like you're walking around with some lady on the street. There's a sign of identification that this is your wife. She's got a ring on her finger. It shows a sign of identification. It's a practical thing. It also demonstrates, it symbolizes the fact she's going to run circles around you. And why do you think she'd walk around 7 times? Yeah, right. And she's thinking to herself, and this is just the beginning. Okay. And then what do you call it? But there's another idea. You see, a ring looks like a link in a chain. Picture links. Okay. When a couple gets married, you're creating another link in the chain of the Jewish people. You're creating a link in the chain of the people. In the chain, where does that chain extend back to? Sends it to Sinai. That means each generation is progressively one step higher on the ladder. When you honor your parents, you're not only honoring those 2 people. You're making a statement. When you're honoring your parents, you're making a statement. Even if you're secular and your parents were secular and you first came to Yiddishkeit on your own later on in life, bottom line is they come from, even if not those 2 people, they come from a generation which is one step closer to Sinai. When you honor them, what you're really doing is you're honoring the whole chain of tradition. You're honoring the entire chain of tradition all the way back to Sinai. Because what you're saying is that these people are at a higher level because they've been that much closer to the giving of the Torah at Sinai. So what you're doing is you're paying tribute to the entire chain of tradition all the way back. You know the famous story with Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky? He was on a plane sitting next to an anthropologist. And plane takes off. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky was an elderly man. After a few minutes, his son was also on the plane, his son and his granddaughter. Son comes over, he says, Tati, are you comfortable? Do you need a blanket? Do you need some food? Do you need anything? No, I'm good. Everything's good. Okay, a few minutes later, his granddaughter comes, like, I gave you Zadie, I gave you something to eat, something to drink, so everything's good. Right? The whole plane flight, every hour, they keep coming back and forth. Finally, the anthropologist turns to Rabbi Kamenetsky. He says, I understand something. What's the difference between you and me? Your son comes over, he's all over you. Your daughter comes over, your granddaughter comes over, she's all over you. My son, my kids barely talk to me. My grandchildren only write to me when they want a gift, around birthday time. What's the difference between you and me? So Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky says, look, I believe in the giving of the Torah at Sinai. Torah was given at Sinai, and my children see me as a generation closer, 2 generations closer. They see me as being on a higher level, and therefore they honor me. You, my friend, believe in evolution. Your children see you as being one step closer to being a gorilla, and therefore they feel that they are on a higher level than you. Why should they honor you? You should honor them. After all, they're advancing away from something. We're advancing towards what they call development. We're advancing towards regression. That's the difference. And therefore, the Torah says we have to honor. When you're honoring your parents, you're paying tribute to the whole thing. This is you're acknowledging the giving of the Torah at Sinai. That's the idea. Okay. Now let's talk a little bit about the halachas. What do you call it? Let's go into the halachas a little bit. First of all, I knew a guy was a guy was in Michigan, and he was hitchhiking. It's about Tshuva. He was hitchhiking. And he's standing out on the side of the road, and a car pulls up. There are 2 black guys driving the car. And they tell him to get in. Okay, gets into the car. They're driving along and tries striking up a conversation, and the guys aren't responding. They're driving along. After about 10 or 15 minutes, the car pulls off of the off-ramp. And as it goes on the off-ramp, all of a sudden, state trooper cuts off the car in front. Another state trooper cuts off. They get out with drawn shotguns. Everybody out, put your hands on the roof of the car. All right. He told me that the 2 guys put their hands on the roof of the car. He started walking towards the trooper and said, "Oh, I'm not with them. Sure, get your hands up on the car." Oh, yeah, they put that. They thought he was Potter. So it turns out these 2 guys had just escaped from Jackson State Penitentiary. They just broke out of Jackson State Penitentiary. They picked them up on the highway. Now, what do you think they were going to do with them? This was not the Chesed committee. Right, so they were either going to kill him, rob, hold him for hostage. Goodness knows what they were going to do, and somebody got it. So when it comes time, sometimes the person says, "Why do I owe God a debt of gratitude?" Why do you owe God a debt of gratitude? Because God has interfered with you doing all sorts of bad things to yourself. That's why you owe a debt of gratitude to God. God has kept you in one piece in spite of yourself. Right? So, okay, let's take it a step further. How far do you have to go? Okay? Now, pay attention carefully. It's a remarkable sequence here. Now, by the way, in Noahide law, there are 7 Noahide laws, right? According to the commentaries, there are 7 Noahide laws, but anything that is instinctive, they're also required to do. It is instinctive to give charity. It's a basic human instinct. You can argue against it logically, but instinctively we understand for some reason, it's almost intuitive, you're supposed to help people who are needy. You could argue logically, why should I help you? I worked for it, you didn't work for it. I got a job, you didn't get a job. Okay, depends how you define somebody needy. Needy doesn't mean just anybody who's lazy. Needy and lazy are 2 different things. But somebody who's genuinely needy, it is instinctive that you're supposed to help them, as opposed to somebody who's lazy, that you shouldn't help him. Why lazy? You're not helping him. You're hurting him. Okay, that's considered instinctive. It's instinctive to help your parents, to honor your parents, to honor older people, and to honor your parents. That's instinctive, and Noachides are also obligated. So the Gemara says, look, there was a Noachide in Ashkelon named Dama ben Nesina. And this Dama ben Nesina, the sages once came to him. They needed the stone for the chest plate. You remember, go to where the stone, the 12 stones on his chest. So they come to this Dama ben Nesina. They say, listen, we heard you have the stone for the chest plate, and we'd like to buy it from you. And we'll offer you 600,000 gold pieces for it. Says, okay, he goes to his father, wake up his father. His father's sleeping, and the keys to the chest where he keeps the stone are under his father while he's sleeping. He says, Sai comes like, sorry, I won't wake up my father for the keys. So he passed up on 600,000 gold pieces. The next year, he had a red cow born in his flock. So the sages came back to him, and they said, we'd like to buy the red cow from you. He said, look, I know that any amount that I ask, you'd pay for a red cow. But I also realize that the only reason that I got this was a reward for honoring my father last year, and therefore I will sell it to you for the low price of 600,000 gold pieces, what I bypassed last year. Okay? So Gemara says, yeah, that's what they did. They bought the paradu. Okay. That's what the Gemara says. Look at the extent of Dama ben Nesina. I got a question. I have a question. Imagine you're at home, your father's sleeping. Guy knocks on the door, and he says, listen, you know, he's dressed to the T, 3-piece suit, gold cufflinks, everything. Guy says to you, he's sweating and he's panting. He says, listen, I'm the CEO of a major corporation. I'm on my way downtown to a meeting with other CEOs. Billions of dollars are on the table right now. I got to be downtown in 20 minutes. My limousine broke down in front of your house. I'll pay you $600,000 cash for your 12-year-old Chevy if you give me the key within a minute so we could drive down there, because the money doesn't mean anything to me. So you get all excited and you run upstairs to get the key, but your dad's sleeping with the pillow and the key to the car is under his pillow. You come down and you say to the guy, listen, you know, sorry, my dad's sleeping, I won't wake up my father. And the guy goes over and says, okay, and he buys the car from your neighbor for $600,000 cash. Okay, your dad wakes up 45 minutes later. Dave, anything happened while I was asleep? Oh, yeah, you know, some guy came in and wanted to buy the car. Which one? The Chevy. Yeah, and what happened? They made an offer. How much? A lot. How much? Cash. How much? Well, $600,000. And? Dad, you don't think I learned anything in yeshiva? I know how to honor you. They taught us how to honor you. I said, no way, I'm waking you up. You know, go ahead, buy it from the neighbor. Right? So then you understand why shortly after the mitzvah of honoring your parents follows the mitzvah of do not murder. Right? It's obvious that, you know, now, I haven't met any of your fathers. I haven't met any of your fathers. There is no doubt in my mind that your father would want to be woken up and then would take a really good nap in the first class seat on a plane on the way to his new vacation spot to spend the 600. So why would the Gemara tell you that story? It's got nothing to do with me. If you would ask me, what should I do? Wake up your dad, loudly and quickly. Your dad wants to be woken up. So why is the Gemara telling you a story like that? Why would the Gemara tell you a story like that? The answer is that honoring parents, I'll tell you a second story. The Gemara says Rabbi Shmuel used to come back from, now pay attention carefully. Rabbi Shmuel used to come back from the Beis Medrash. Every time he came back, he's in Tana. Every time he came back from the Beis Medrash, his mother wanted to wash his feet. Mother went to wash his feet. Would you let your mom wash your feet? Rough, right? He let her, because he knew she wanted to wash his feet. Then after she washed his feet, She wanted to drink out the bucket of filthy foot water. And Rabbi Shmuel wouldn't let her. So she complained about him in the Beis Medrash, and the other sages said, if that's what your mother wants to do, you have to let her drink out the filthy foot water. Now, I haven't met any of your mothers. Maybe one. I don't believe any mother of anyone in this room ever had a temptation, ever. Not only she never drank your filthy bath water, I don't believe she ever had a dilemma. Somebody hold me back. What should it be? Decaf or foot water? What'll it be tonight? I don't believe that. I don't believe she ever had a problem. The answer, so what are they telling you this for? The answer is they're emphasizing in the extreme that when you honor your parents, it has nothing to do with you. When you honor your parents, it's all about your parents. So if your dad says, hey, Dave, can you go out and get me a big steak with some French fries and fried onions, onion rings, and a big bottle of cholesterol juice, right? And you say, Dad, no, I don't think you should eat that stuff. I want you to have a mushroom souffle. What's the halacha? The halacha is leave out the French and get your dad the steak. That's the halacha. Do what your dad wants. If it's an extreme situation, obviously, if it's an extreme situation, if your father suffers from dizzy spells, and he says, well, take me for a walk on the roof, that you wouldn't be allowed to do. If your father is at a point where if your father Chas v'Shalom is a diabetic and he says go buy me 6 candy bars, that you're not allowed to do something that could lead to imminent death. But something that is distasteful to you or something that you prefer not, that's not your decision. That's not your decision. You want to honor your parents, you have to honor them the way they want to be, not the way you want to honor them. And that's what the Gemara is emphasizing. Who in the world, first of all, it says Dama ben Nasina's father was fabulously wealthy. Michael Jordan, during the time it took him, he earned $57,000, something like that, while shooting 18 holes of golf. How do you like that? It's more than the teachers of our Samach make. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. And put together in a year. A person like that, I'd rather take a nap. Don't wake me up for $600,000. I don't need the money. I don't care. You understand? The Gemara is trying to show you in the extreme, if it has nothing to do with you. It has absolutely nothing to do with you.